Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today, I'm talking about the Prodigy, The Day Is My Enemy. Well, I think we already know why this video is here now. Yes, I decided to post this as a tribute to the late Keith Flint, frontman of the Prodigy who just recently passed away. I wasn't totally sure how I wanted to best handle a tribute to this man, though I absolutely believe he deserves one. As a super iconic voice and an integral part of one of the most well-loved outfits in all of electronic music. A bunch of people told me I should just do the whole discography review right now as a tribute to him, though that didn't feel right to me either. Not just because I'm already in the middle of a different one, but more importantly because I feel like on the vast majority of Prodigy albums, the star of the show is not Flint, but Liam Howlett. Flint may have been a key driving force on their most popular album, The Fat of the Land, but he wasn't anywhere to be found on Experience, Music for the Jilted Generation, or Always Outnumbered, Never Outgunned. 3 entire albums of theirs that he had nothing to do with, and 2 of those 3 being among the big classics that the Prodigy made. I mean, I'll be brutally honest, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Prodigy just kept going on without Keith Flint. Even though I don't actually want that to happen, I just wouldn't be surprised if it did. It just doesn't feel right to be tributing the Keith Flint by reviewing albums where his contribution to the band ended at Dancer. Now, of course, The Fat of the Land would have been the obvious pick for a one-off tribute review to Keith Flint. It's the one that probably contains everyone's strongest and most positive memories of the man. It's the big, iconic classic that everyone here already recognizes and I imagine is a huge part of a lot of people's lives. Not to mention, I think most people, including me, would consider that to be a much stronger album than the one I'm actually covering here. But I decided to instead cover The Day Is My Enemy, because it's the one Prodigy album that feels most like a full band effort rather than a Liam Howlett solo project featuring Flint and Maxim. It's also easily the Prodigy album with the most Keith Flint on it. The man's vocals are on 7 of the 14 tracks on here. And regardless of what anyone thinks about it, I think it's one of their strongest albums mainly because of his and Maxim's presence. I do have problems with the album, which I'll get to, of course, but none of them have anything to do with Keith Flint. The man put so much raw energy and passion into this album, and sounded like he was really having a great time, as he pretty much always did. He's a major linchpin in what made this one hold up as well as it does for me. I'm off and on whether or not this album actually qualifies as great, but I feel more inclined to call it as such, especially now, because of the 14 tracks here, I don't think there's a single bad one in the bunch. I can just kind of scan my eyes over the track listing and instantly recall the sound of pretty much every single track here. All of them have some kind of hook or other musical element that just really sticks in the brain, and all of them feel really well sonically defined and like they're all adding something of value. There's nothing here that feels redundant or that didn't leave anything for me to enjoy. And there's enough of a cohesive sound running throughout to make it feel like it all belongs together and to make the album have its own flavor separate from their previous ones. Well, okay, I'll admit it's sonically not that far removed from The Fat of the Land, but there's still definitely a unique experience you can get here that you can't get there. Namely that The Day Is My Enemy is probably the angriest and darkest album that they have. The attitude running throughout is just balls to the wall, destroy everything in sight insanity. It's got this real visceral aggression and explosive destructiveness to it that seems to go even further than their classic albums do. It's an album that makes me feel like I'm in the middle of a war zone, but I'm still having a ton of fun the whole time. May as well go down each of the tracks. I don't know if I have a ton to say about each one individually, because for most of them the appeal for me is really simple and comes down to things I've already mentioned above. Take the track Nasty, for instance. That's a pretty brainless track that doesn't offer anything to analyze in terms of lyrics or has any fresh musical ideas you couldn't already get from earlier tracks of theirs like Firestarter. I just know that when Keith Flint is hollering, "Nasty, nasty," I am just totally getting into it and feeling compelled to holler right alongside him. He is just so clearly having so much fun and providing so much raw power, and not just coming from his yelling raw at a few points. Oh yeah, and this track has that one part where they say, "I ain't no tourist," which I guess led them right into their next album, so that's cool. But yeah, for the most part, my enjoyment of most of these tracks is just at that surface level. It's catchy, and its aggressiveness is really easy to get into, and doesn't go further than that. But you don't really need more than that out of the Prodigy. The hooks are memorable and make me want to yell along with Keith Flint and Maxim. What more could you need? Rock, rock, rock. Rok-Weiler! Get your fight on, get your fight on, get something to bite on. Welcome to the wall of death. Drive on straight through the roadblocks. The radio plays, a sound in your ear, a calling to all, the message is clear. Okay, but anyways, if that was the only defining feature of this album, I doubt it'd stick in my mind as well as it does. A lot of these tracks do have interesting elements to them to help set themselves apart. Like the title track that opens us up mostly feels like just a build-up with a slow burn vocal performance from Martina Topley-Bird singing a line from a Cole Porter song. And the military drumming as well is pretty cool, really puts you on the edge of your seat. It all makes for a nice setup for Nasty, which pays it off with Keith Flint's above-mentioned awesomeness. And then leading directly into Rebel Radio with its super fast pace process vocal lines. Rebel Radio, Radio. Pretty repetitive, but it's still fun, and Flint's chorus helps make the track even much more appealing. Ibiza features a guest appearance from Jason Williamson of Sleaford Mods, yelling in his super thick accent alongside Flint about this recent crowd of David Guetta-style DJs who just pre-program their sets and pretend to do something on stage. And they're wondering, what's he fucking doing? And we get Destroy, which admittedly doesn't stick in my head as much as most tracks on here, but makes up for it with a bit of a cool callback to the sounds of the early Experience and Jilted Generation days. Much more electronic focused with all these screeching stabs that still just add to that raw energy the whole album has. And there's Wild Frontier, easily one of the biggest highlights for me, mainly thanks to its progression of super fast 8-bit chiptune chords. It really stands out sonically, and Maxim Reality's yelling over it certainly doesn't hurt either. Gotta face your fears in the wild frontier. Then Rok-Weiler, pretty simplistic track with another great Keith Flint performance. And then there's Beyond the Deathray, a pure instrumental track that goes completely beatless. It's just a pure build-up of fuzzy, distorted synths and progressions of piano chords. Not exactly your traditional ambient piece here, but it fits really well with the tone of the rest of the album, and it has this super epic and dramatic feel to it that really pumps me up. And it's paid off with Rhythm Bomb featuring modern dubstep producer Flex Pavilion. Another track that really does not have a complex appeal. The more modern production tinges provided by Flex Pavilion do help it make it stand out more in the track listing, but it's mainly that repetitive pitched up sample that carries most of the track with its infectiousness. I need a rhythm to make my body move. And you get the fast-paced, almost drum and bassish Roadblox and the anthemic and aggressive Get Your Fight On. I kind of already explained their appeal above, but they keep going after this. Medicine, I'm told, is inspired by traditional Balkan music, which is a cool new flavor, and the accent on the main hook helps make it stand out more too. Bit of medicine we delivering. And then we got Invisible Sun, which meanwhile moves into a much slower and more toned down mode than what we had. By comparison, again, it's still pretty loud and rambunctious like everything else on here, but it feels like it's going for a weirder and more psychedelic edge. And Keith Flint's hook, while not super present in the mix, is still pretty memorable. And finally, we close with Wall of Death, which apparently has vocals from both Flint and Liam Howlett himself, incidentally sounding kinda similar to the latter's guest appearance on the Pendulum track Immunize. And yeah, not much to say about this track. It's basically got the same brainless appeal as Nasty, just fast-paced, aggressive fun. I don't know if it's necessarily the best ending you could have possibly picked among all the choices provided here. I think my pick would have been like Wild Frontier. But after sitting through all these hyper-aggressive tracks and getting to Invisible Sun, which sounds like they're finally starting to run out of energy, they hit you with one more fast and punchy track as they say, nope, we still got more gas left in the tank. So yeah, that's all the tracks. Really don't have anything bad to say about any of them individually. But that's not to say I don't have my problems with the album, and there's really one pretty major department where The Day Is My Enemy falls short, and that's the production. The production on this album I can see being a major turnoff for some people because it is just not good. Like, this is not an album that juggles a lot of musical elements and gives them all a lot of space to breathe. It's an album that just compresses everything to its limit and feels like it squeezes every sound into a tiny space for the sake of making everything louder. And it's consistently hyper-compressed across every track. There's no dynamic range at all. It's just a total sonic onslaught that's likely to damage your hearing even if you're careful about it. Now, I get the feeling that this is an intentional choice. It wasn't like No Tourists where the whole thing just felt like a rush job. The loudness and hyper-compression certainly does aesthetically fit with the sound and feel of the album and doesn't take away from the listening experience that much for me. But what it does do is make this album feel especially long. I mean, it's about the same length as The Fat of the Land. Hell, I think it's even shorter, only by a few seconds. But The Fat of the Land feels like it goes by a lot faster. The Day Is My Enemy is a brutal listen. The way it just unrelentingly blasts you with sound for 14 tracks always totally wears me down by the end. And it's not an album that remotely leaves me hungering for more when all is said and done. Needless to say, this is not an album for the faint of heart and might actually be physically dangerous if you have it up on a high enough volume. But I gotta give it praise for its consistency, for the fact that I can basically listen to the whole thing in my head just reading the track listing without actually hearing the album playing out of any headphones or speakers. It's just that memorable and catchy. No easy feat for any band, and even the Prodigy themselves can't usually pull it off this consistently well. Like, I can't do that for music for the Delta generation, and I like that album more than this one. And of course, Keith Flint, whose presence is felt more here than on any other Prodigy album, even on the tracks he's not actually on. It feels like he's just there, adding on to the total onslaught with his nah-stay attitude that just happens to be as energetic and infectious as all the tunes he's singing and rapping and yelling. I know not everyone is going to consider this to be the best pick for an album to pay tribute to Keith Flint's accomplishments. I know this album was absolutely not for everyone, but I think it's something to be said that even this far out of the band's prime that he could still deliver that same passion and energy as he could in the days of the Prodigy's peak, and keep me captivated at all the fun and mindless destruction that he captures in his performance. The man will be sorely missed. I take my glasses off to you, sir. So yeah, I'm overall feeling Day Is My Enemy. Fuck it, I'm overall feeling a solid 8. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it. But I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. There are some people you want to add yourself to that list or make me a review. The link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.